Now, well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am so delighted to welcome a legend from the VC. He's been away for a year and a half. Welcome back, Teddy, all the way from Kansas.
Ready.
Mark, John, it's just awesome to be here. You know, I've always wanted to be at one of your sessions, so this is going to have to do. Just let me know when I'm supposed to eat the sheep's cheese. That's all. You know.
It's been in the fridge for 6 months. Actually. It's still within its sell-by date, though.
Actually, John, I have to say I did find a really good supplier of sheep's cheese that wasn't your Portuguese delicatessen.
Oh, really? Oh, that's it. I'm redundant.
Well, if you would allow me just a second, because I'm sure there are a few people that's like, you know, where the hell have you been? And I have literally, not figuratively, but literally been away from home for a year and a half working. And I'm now back at home, back in my home, and ready to resume some YouTube activities. And so this is officially my re-entry back into the vinyl community. And I do plan on getting back into making my own videos, but I could not skip this grand opportunity to be with you guys.
Well, it's been one of the things, you know, people have just been discovering new things that they weren't doing before the lockdown. And for me and John, this is one of them, you know, still making videos.
Brilliant. I mean, it was just a brilliant thing that, and then bringing on all of these other people, it's just been fantastic.
It's been so nice to kind of meet people, you know, and there's always this sense that we all know each other really well somehow, even though we've never met, you know, but we're familiar with our spaces and, you know, our tastes.
Yeah.
Anyway, without further ado,
here we go.
I'm going to start, Teddy, then it's going to go you and then John. Okay.
So Mark, me and John.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am going to kick off with something brand new. This possibly is my album of the year so far. This is Wilmer Archer. Have you ever come across Wilmer Archer, Teddy?
No.
This album is called A Western Circular. It's his first solo album. He was in a band apparently called Slime, who I was totally unfamiliar with. And he's a multi-instrumentalist, mainly keyboard player, but also guitarist. And I guess this album, just what's so refreshing about it is it's very, very hard to place it. I mean, he actually says on the inner sleeve, he says, this music was designed to be listened to, never heard, while in a very calm mood with no distractions. Despite occasional saxophones, this is not a jazz album. And it's kind of, it's all over the shop. I mean, it took 5 years apparently for him to gather the music together and the collaborators, but there's all kinds of color and texture. And there's, you know, it goes from, you know, hip hop with a sort of string quartet with MF Doom to a guy called Sudan Archives, who I'd not been familiar with before. And there's sort of cellos and violins and double basses, loads of musicians on it, but just very varied. No track really sounds the same. John,
I spotted something actually from this when I got it and played a track on. I'm doing a radio show now as well as Mark actually, and then I listened to it and I suddenly realized. And then you played a track on your show, and I just suddenly realized I think I've decoded the record. Actually, I think I know what he's doing. I think he's rearranged other songs and changed the chord sequences on them, because the track you played, Mark, on your last show, that's Watermelon and Easter Hay, the Frank Zappa tune, just reorganized everything.
Really?
And it's really clever. Well, I'm not certain, but I think this is what he's done actually.
Wow.
On the record.
Well,
so he's
Mark,
kind of,
I think
he's just kind of chopped them up and just put them back in a slightly different order. But it's really clever, I think, actually.
I think your description really hits on something, Mark. I don't know about you guys, but listening to music, you know, when you do it for so many years, I think I look to be surprised.
Yes.
You know, look to, even within like an improvisational solo, you know,
yes.
where someone takes it somewhere you do not expect. That's what's really rich for me. And even within an album like you just described, where it's just you can't put a finger on it, I love that.
So
I think
it's really good. It's really good.
Archer.
Very good, and kind of all feels very familiar somehow or other, even though it's, and
Yes.
I think that's why it is that a lot of the songs have just been slightly reconfigured from other songs, brilliant with different instrumentation and stuff. It's really clever, I think.
Well, I'm going to go for the throat, and we'll start with a Blue Note record. That it's just a brilliant record that just does not get quite enough love. But it deserves every bit of praise of some of the great ones from the mid 60s. And this is Bobby Hutcherson's Dialogue. So this is from 1965, from that great period, referred to as the new thing. I kind of refer to it as free Vanguard. But I mean, an immense lineup, where you've got, Bobby Hutcherson on vibes, you've got Freddie Hubbard, Sam Rivers, Andrew Hill is on piano, Richard Davis, and Joe Chambers. So compositionally, Joe Chambers has 2 numbers and Andrew Hill has 3. So if you're a fan of Andrew Hill, I mean, he's at his compositional peak here. I mean, this is coming, Bobby Hutcherson here, this is coming on the heels of his participation with Eric Dolphy's Out to Lunch, which he was just so important to it. And he doesn't take immense solos here. It really is a group effort. But I mean, on one level, it's kind of an Andrew Hill record, and it's just phenomenal. John, are you familiar with it?
I love it. Absolutely love it. It's one of Andrew Hill is my man, really. I think he's great. But it was his first record as well, Bobby Hutcherson, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which is really, kind of radical first record to have, I think, as well.
Yeah, and it's just that sweet spot where they're, Blue Note is actually accepting, some of these new ideas, and and Hutcherson, like I said, he's so integral to like some of the Jackie McLean records, and Out to Lunch, and he does not hog solos here at all. It's beautiful. If you like Andrew Hill's Blackfire or, Point of Departure, this slots in, those 3 songs in here slot in just beautifully. Yep.
I love that one.
I know it's been reissued on, the 75th anniversary or whatever. So, boy, if you haven't heard this, really urge you to.
Very good. Okay, I'm going to go for an interesting Blue Note one from a very unfashionable period of Blue Note.
With an unfashionable cover.
This is from the mid '80s, when Blue Note was not the kind of thing it is now, and then actually. And this is a James Newton record. James Newton's a flute player, and it's him really going through the Ellington and Billy Strayhorn songbook, but doing it with a great band, which includes Arthur Blythe and Olu Dara, who's Nazi's dad. Billy Hart on drums, Jay Hoggard, all kinds of really interesting and it's beautiful. It's a really, really great record, actually. And I hadn't played, this is kind of another great lockdown thing. I hadn't played it for probably years, actually. And it's
that's a hell of a band.
A hell of a band, actually. And there's more. And it's a beautiful record. I mean, they've done a really good job on it. And I've noticed actually, since I started playing it, a couple of people have been doing blog posts about it as well, which is kind of interesting. I think it could be one of the ones that's reissued in the next series, but deeply unfashionable, therefore very uncheap, very inexpensive, and a great record, actually.
No, I know that cover you would pass up in a second.
It's horrible. I specialize in horrible covers, actually, on videos of them. But this is a great record.
Nice. Well, I just want to say a little bit about the in the momentness, the description that you were just giving, Teddy, about being taken somewhere else with music. I think I was 11, and I grew up in North London, and there was it was a very mini kind of community free festival that happened once a year by the swimming pool called the Winchester Festival. And I remember going there. It was a drizzly day, a bit like today. And I remember Traffic's The Low Spark of High Heel Boys being played on the PA system. And that was transporting me.
Mm.
And then I saw this band that featured this guy, who's Gordon Beck, who's a pianist, and Don Weller, a sax player, who actually is another of the COVID casualties. I think he's died in the last few months. And they were playing this kind of, I guess, very early 70s jazz fusions. I mean, you know, funky kind of jazz, but kind of post-boppy, going off places. And I was totally transported by the solos. You know, I didn't know what was happening. It was like I was the Pied Pipe, you know, the music was the Pied Pipe, and it was taking me places I'd never been before. And my life literally changed experiencing live music and people soloing. I'd never seen that before. Anyway, that's the precursor to this album, which came out in 1969. It's called Gyroscope, and this features Gordon Beck on the piano, and Tony Oxley on the drums, and Jeff Klein on the bass, who all at one time or other were part of the Ronnie Scott's house band, I believe. Yeah, just this is a really interesting album. It's got a post-bop meets free jazz kind of vibe to it. So
does it kind of hit that where McLaughlin and Sermon were together? Is it kind of in that vein?
The previous album that Gordon Beck did was with John McLaughlin, and he also was playing with Alan Holdsworth around this time. And he obviously later went on to join Nucleus, and was, I think, two of these guys were with Tubby Hayes as well.
Right. Gordon Beck went to Europe then, didn't he, and did a lot of stuff in Europe.
Yeah. But it's just, this got reissued as part of Record Store Day, I think, a couple of years ago, and it was before a very, very rare record. And it's just lovely the way everyone's listening to each other, and just the way the music kind of flows and ebbs and does odd things, and people kind of step forward. But it's just a trio, you know.
I think that's a really interesting period in England, similar to what I just described with, you know, 64, 65 with Blue Note. It's just, there's a really interesting transitional space there.
Yes.
Yeah, very cool. Well, we're going to go very, very different here. I'm going to go a little classical. So this is Olivier Mession, French 20th century composer. Just an immensely influential person. You know, he taught at the Paris Conservatory and taught people of the likes of Pierre Boulez, Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, Xenakis. So, I mean, really amazing. But he and Bach they're in a race for who had the most organ compositions. He composed something in the area of 7 hours of organ music. He was an organist for years, also at, you know, his church, who was Catholic, and wrote this amazing works that just, you know, I can't remember how many there are, but this is one in particular that in translation is The Exquisite Corpse, basically. The interesting thing about this is I can't sense anything liturgical about it at all. If anything, it's more like it's out of the mind of David Lynch. It is just its own universe. And Jennifer Bate, who was British, who passed away earlier this year. Well, if you see pictures of her, she looks like an ambassador to a country. She is sleek. She is elegant. She wears really fine jewelry, and gets out there and plays this very, very different music. Yeah, it's really, really difficult to explain, but it is just off into this other world, and it is its own world. And my friend Jim Netter, who I worked with recently, turned me on to this, and I thank him immensely, because it's not abrasive, but it's just, you can't put your finger on it.
It's really interesting. I think he had completely had his own world, didn't he, as well, actually? I mean,
Yeah.
kind of, that's a really interesting set of vocal pieces based on birdsong he did as well. Which
Correct. Yeah, he actually transcribed bird calls as best he could, and then transferred it to music.
Yeah.
But immensely powerful 20th century composer, and this is a unique set within all of his compositions. So very, very cool. I know there's a bunch of it on Spotify that you can check out, but yeah.
Nice.
So I'm going to go kind of classical as well. I'm going to go for, this was a kind of record by a group called Gentle Fire, which was an experimental classical group. And it kind of really, it was a kind of important one for me because I kind of had bought records by Stockhausen and Cage and all this kind of stuff before. But there's something about the presentation of this record. It's got two Cage pieces, one for his amplified toy pianos and one for carry-on, which is another kind of keyboard-based instrument. And it's also got Christian Wolff, the kind of American composer, and Earl Brown on here. And it's just kind of, it's sequenced really, really well. It's recorded really well. And it's just a really great record, actually. And I know quite a lot of people have great fondness for this kind of, this
Yeah,
record.
I'm not familiar with that. I know you showed some Bartok, I think, was it the last video and stuff?
Yeah, not so long ago, yeah. And interesting enough, one of the key players in this group was Hugh Davis, who was an instrument builder, made his own instruments as well as being a musician, who also played an improvised music scene. So he played with Evan Parker and Tony Oxley, interesting enough.
Okay.
But this is a great, really nice record, actually.
What label is that on, John?
EMI Electrola, which was
okay.
So it's on.
Yeah, that's a really cool cover too. I like the image.
It's just something of, sometimes the whole thing, the record, the cover, everything needs to kind of work, actually. And I really started to get, particularly the way the toy piano pieces are recorded. It sound the spread right across the stereo spectrum. Really nice stuff.
Well, so far you guys are hitting it out of the park, man.
Well, this bears no relation to those last few records. So I'm glad that's the beauty of this selection.
Yeah.
We can go anywhere.
Oh, yes.
No one would be expecting Thank Christ for the Bomb by the Groundhogs. And I have to say a big shout out to Secco Funk, who has returned. Van is back and turns out to be a big Groundhogs fan.
Yeah, that's right.
As well as Vanilla Fudge, which, it's
Awesome.
great.
I know, that's awesome.
We're all into everything.
Really weird thing, Mark. I was typing out a comment on the Secco Funk page about to recommend he listen to Man because of his John Cipollina thing. And I just looked down the list and you'd already done it.
So this is, and I never saw the Groundhogs. I know you did, John. I was slightly too young, but they were absolutely epitomized the late 60s, or even more the early 70s, when everyone was wandering around in greatcoats, sort of army surplus gear, and everyone had long hair and, smelled of patchouli. And there was just such a kind of, it was just a very alternative kind of scene. But these guys, all the albums, those early 70s albums, there's such kind of conviction. I mean, they're a blues rock trio, but they don't sound cliched. They just sound like they really mean it. And Tony McPhee, also very political. So he was actually always saying a lot lyrically. And it's just the kind of, it's just the kind of true grit and the vibe of the way, particularly this trio, which is called Ken Pustelnick and Pete Cruikshank and Tony McPhee. They just really gel together, and they're kind of grooving in a rock way. And actually, I've got a new DJ mixer which can do loops very easily, and there's some fantastic hip hop loops actually on this album, which I don't think anyone's sampled yet. So Tony McPhee and the Groundhogs, of course, the Groundhogs, who I think very early in the day backed John Lee Hooker when he came over to the UK.
Indeed. Yeah.
Doesn't Tony McPhee pop up now and again? He's still around, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he pops up now and again still, right?
Yeah, there's a very strange solo album that actually John Coltrane 68 recommended to me, and I got on the strength of his recommendation, which is all about hunting, fox hunting. And one side is completely electronic, It's just,
Very, very odd. It's almost quite disturbing, actually.
it's always what?
It's almost quite disturbing, I think.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's like,
Anyway, there you go.
Well,
Where you
I'm going to go with a newer release, and where, you know, the last record required a little headspace. Sometimes we just want fun. We want a fun record and a fun cover as well. This is Black Market Brass. This is a Afrobeat kind of brass group out of Minneapolis called Undying Thirst. It's a gatefold. I haven't popped it open yet because the hype sticker is one of the most right-on hype stickers ever. It says a noxious mix of diesel and bleach drenched in Afrobeat. and these guys know Afrobeat very, very well, but they mix it with some other things. It's almost, in a sense, Afrobeat with the 70s television themes, cop show themes. It's got that vibe, but it's a big brass band with just tons of rhythm. It's just fun. The whole thing, top to bottom, will just, you know, make you smile and move. And you know, in these crazy times, this is necessary occasionally. But this is on a label called Colemine, Colemine, I think out of Columbus, Ohio, and they've been mining more funk-oriented stuff in the States. Some you know, smaller groups, different areas around the Midwest and whatnot. And like I said, Black Market Brass is from Minneapolis, and man, this just kicks ass. You know, it's so. I know, Mark, you would dig this. If you have, you know, Spotify, I know they're on there. Check it out for sure. It's just a ton of fun.
Black Market Brass, right? Got it.
okay, Lloyd McNeil is next up. Somebody who I have to say I didn't know anything about until Soul Jazz re-released a bunch of his stuff a couple of years ago, and he's like completely his own thing. I mean, he's kind of artist as well as being a really, really beautiful flute player, actually, very unaffected kind of flute style, and he had kind of hung out with Fela, so there's a connection with the Afrobeat thing. He also hung out with Picasso for quite a long time as well. An extraordinary character, and this is a very nice. There's about 4 or 5 of his records. This one's called Elegia. And it's got a great band on here with Cecil McBee and Nana Vasconcelos and a whole range of other people. And it's just really, it's an incredibly peaceful record, actually. I mean, it's almost kind of sounds like a kind of chill out record in a way, although it's much more interesting than that. There's a lot more going on in it. But it's, really interesting stuff. And just, and there's, Cecil McBee is featured heavily on it, actually. And he's a kind of wonderful bass player, I think. But really interesting that I say there's 3 or 4 which have been reissued on Soul Jazz, and I've been listening to this a lot actually over there. And this was recorded in 1980, but it could have been recorded any time. Really, it could have been recorded in '65 or now. Actually,
what's his name again, John?
Lloyd McNeil.
Lloyd McNeil. Ah.
And really, and it was originally all his stuff was originally on kind of private press levels.
Can you imagine if you hosted a dinner party with Fela and Picasso? I know.
That's right. A classic. But he is extraordinary character. I mean, he's just been everywhere. It's like he seems to pop up, and never heard of him before.
Well, I've got a connection, and that connection is the flute. Now, this record actually arrived the first thing this morning, so I've only listened to it a couple of times, but I'm sure people are very familiar with the Message from the Tribe. Philip Ranelagh and Wendell Harrison. This is another Pure Pleasure reissue, and they're just phenomenal. They're I haven't had a dud yet. This is Wendell Harrison, of course, on the flute and the sax. Phil Ranelagh on the trombone, and this is the sort of sound of Detroit in the early '70s. The kind of, I guess, almost like the fusion of the kind of some of the Motown players with the jazz cats, and just coming up with this incredibly sort of funky soul brew, but with a really sort of strong kind of conscious.
Yeah, there's a black power element to it as well. That time frame.
And yeah,
Tribe used to run soup kitchens and stuff, didn't they, in
yeah,
Detroit?
yeah.
I
And
mean,
there
like
was
for real.
apparently there was a kind of newspaper that was coming out. There was a whole kind of community around the scene that was really strong for about 4 or 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, Marcus Belgrave, Charles Moore, yeah, yeah, loads of people guesting on this, and yeah, just great music. I mean, I can't speak hugely knowledgeably because I've only heard it twice so far, but I was immediately grabbed by the groove on the first track called "What We Need," and
Mm.
the vocal on that as well. But yeah, very nice.
Yeah, and you're spot on about Pure Pleasure. They just do a hell of a job,
Yeah.
and they sound great, and because you'd be paying out the nose for an original, and
Mm,
it might be very dodgy in the audio department, So
mm, mm.
anyway, well, it's sort of in a similar vein. I also wanted to feature another kind of underappreciated album from a label that's very popular, in the VCBYG Actuel. And it's Arthur Jones' Scorpio.
Mm.
And this is one of my favorites of the entire series. He obviously is an alto player from Cleveland, Ohio. He definitely lives in that, inside that perfect triangle of Coltrane and Eiler and Ornette Coleman. This is a trio setting. He's got Claude Delclue on drums and Beb Guerin that, who are on a number of these BYG Actuels. The first side is, a little bit more on the avant-free side of things, but he spent time in rock and roll bands, so he knew how to handle a ballad. And so the second side is more of ballad based stuff, but it still, has an edge to it. But this record contains probably my favorite track of all of the BYG Actuals. It's called Brother B. And it starts out in a very somber mood, and it switches gears to one of the most high octane solos you'll ever hear. I mean, it's literal wailing, and I mean in the sense of I sensed crying, not just just all out for all out's sake. He still was connected to the melody, even though it was just just so intense. And then he brought it back down, so he knew how to tell a story as well. And but then he just kind of disappeared. I don't really know what happened to him. I know he died in 1998. I just don't know where he went or what happened or why, but he was very skilled.
I think
And
he reappeared. I think he's on one or two of those Alan Silver records, but that's about the only time I've
yes,
ever heard of him since, I think.
yeah, and it was from this time frame in France, and then don't know what happened, but again, just an awesome, photograph on the back, similar thing. But this one just doesn't get a lot of attention, and I really feel that it should, because it's really it's palatable. Even the edgier stuff is palatable, and I just think it's great.
Mm.
Okay, time to go to full bore. Peter Brotzman. I was looking back at one of your last videos, Teddy, and you showed Machine Gun in your last video you did, actually. And I've been digging in, I've been listening to a lot of stuff that got me into the kind of freer end of the music, actually. And this was actually his first record. I mean, it's amazing. He's still making music now, Brotzman. This was recorded back in 1967. And it's called Four Adolf Sax, and it's Peter Brotzman with Peter Kovald on bass, great bass player, Peter Kovald, and Sven Johansson on drums. And it's interesting, it's kind of, you can hear the influence of the American, of Albert Ayler and people on this record, much more than on some of the later stuff. And it kind of sounds quite inside some of this, actually. It's quite interesting. It doesn't sound as free as I remembered it at all at the time. But he's a great player. I mean, he's actually a much more interesting player than people give him credit for.
Yeah. Have you heard any of this newer stuff that he does, this duo that he does with Heather Lee, who's the pedal steel player? It's brilliant.
It's really weird. Of course, they're having a relationship as well, the two of them, I think, aren't they?
Yeah. Which makes it a little weird.
But yeah, so he's still, the fact he's still around, still making interesting stuff. But this was this was on FMP. There's original from the original kind of series. But yeah, interesting. I mean, he was a big guy for me in terms of getting into the music.
Oh, John, you and your early European free jazz collection, man, you blow me away.
It's my pension, I think.
There you go.
Well, I'm not going to get much for this because it's a bloody CD, but it's not out on vinyl. But this came out, I think, about a month ago, and it's just a compilation of tracks that have all got the involvement of Tom Bell from Philadelphia, who I just have to say, there's something about his productions that are quite breathtaking. I didn't know much about him, but apparently, he was basically training up as a classical player. He had barely heard any R&B music till he was 17, and then suddenly, thought actually this was a different direction he might take. But again, his arrangements bring in all kinds of color and different, flugelhorns and French horns and strings, and there's this kind of amazing, a little bit like Bacharach, just bringing different kind of flavor to great songs. And a lot of, obviously there's the classic tunes that we all know and love from the Delphonics and the Stylistics and the Spinners. But there's also, tunes on here like TikTok by Connie Stevens that I wasn't familiar with, and What Kind of Lady by Dee Dee Sharp. And I didn't realize that Tom Bell did an album with Dusty Springfield as well.
Really?
Yeah. It came out in about 1969.
There's the one after the one she did at Fame, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, just again, for these times, if you're wanting something just great to listen to in the car, you're going on a long journey, there's just some wonderful tunes here and wonderful arrangements. So very highly recommended. Ready or Not, Tom Bell.
Cool.
I think a lot of arrangers at that time were listening to French music. Going back to the Messiaen connection, listening to Debussy and Ravel and people. You can hear it in Gil Evans. You can hear it in. But I was listening to a Spinner's album on the headphones, which I haven't done to a long time. And there's amazing detail going on in there. The arrangement's absolutely fantastic.
Well, earlier in the session, we mentioned the legend, Chris Cole, John Coltrane, 68. And this album is inspired by him. This is one of, the Nonesuch Explorer series, the African Mabira. And it says the Shona people of Rhodesia, of course, Rhodesia is now Zimbabwe, but there's still, connections to the instruments. This is simple, honest music. The Mbira is like a thumb piano kalimba, but it's larger and is usually encased in kind of a resonator piece of wood. And then the other instrument is the hosho, which is just a gourd percussion instrument. And then 3 voices. It's so simple, it's so pure. And there's something written on the back of this that I have to read because it really sums it up quite well. Here it is. Much of the instrumental and vocal music of East Africa has been described as repetitive and monotonous. Apologists counter that the music is quite varied and exciting, yet free to pejorative connotations. The former is probably closer for what the African musician is striving for. There's a saying in East Africa that white men often, white men are often sick because they change what they eat so often. The African would say, if you eat the same thing every day, at least you know what killed you. So
Good tip.
yeah, but it's very meditative. Yes, it is repetitive, but it's done in such a slightly varied way. Now I know, like, Steve Rice studied drumming over in Ghana on the other side of the continent, but there's some of the same rules apply here, where yeah, this nice rolling, calm, repetitive aspects, and then these really nice counterpoint vocals are going on. This is just, you get sucked in, and again, it's transition. You know, you're just taken somewhere else, and then all of a sudden it's over. You know, but it's just beautiful, and the songs. Interesting, they're kind of social songs in that, like one of them that says the subject is about disagreement. Another is the subject is about teasing. Another one's hurt and sorrow, discipline. You know, so they have, you know, these sort of social themes that they're expressing, and you can hear them, you know, within it. But some of it is just downright beautiful, beautiful, simple, honest stuff. You know, very cool.
I'm pretty sure I've heard this, but the mbira, it's such a portable instrument, and I'm sure I've heard about people just walking and playing.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of got there is that kind of repetitiveness, but it's like you're walking,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah, and like I said, it's like a kalimba, but the metal strips are laid out a little bit different. They're larger, and like I said, it's housed in this kind of piece of resonator deal. So it's a cousin for sure. But yeah, and the patterns that they set up, and then, you know, the Hosho's just kind of, you know, keeping a beat, and then these just really humanistic vocals that are going on. I just love it.
there's an instrument designer who John and I know very well called David Sawyer, and he's been making various kind of versions of that instrument himself and attaching pickups and stuff to it. And there's a piece of music that features that kind of sound and a few other players that it's become a theme tune for this a work project that John and I are involved in, and every meeting starts with everyone listening to this piece of music with their eyes closed for 2 minutes, because it just sort of it just hits a particular,
You know what I mean.
yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to describe, other than it really kind of can connect with your, not so much your head, it connects with your soul real quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, tip of the cap to Chris Cole for sure.
That's definitely a Cole record. Okay, going somewhere else, but probably not million miles away in some ways. This for me, I've been listening. This for me is probably one of the top 5 ever hip hop records. Really, this is the Fantastic Volume 2 from Slum Village, and it's a kind of, in terms of having just a whole album of really consistent Dilla kind of beats, it's just fantastic. I think, as the album's called, and it's just yeah, just a pleasure to listen to. All, I mean, a lot of hip hop records are kind of good to listen to, but this one you can just play all the way through, and it's just got some great stuff on it as well. And kind of, yeah, so you suddenly realize how there's actually nobody like him. I mean, Madlib gets close, I think, in some of the stuff he does. This has got some really classic stuff on. So big up to Slum Village.
Cool.
Well, this is another new record, or a new old record. This has come out, it's on the Far Out recording label. Brazilian Dorian Dream by Manfredo Fest, who is a keyboard player and synth player. Yeah, it's Brazilian. It's very Latin-based grooves. The Dorian mode, for any musicians or even non-musicians, is the scale that starts on the second note of the major scale. So when you start on the second step, and it has a minor feel, and a lot of the music here is in that, using that mode and using that key. So it's got that sort of slightly thoughtful kind of vibe, but it's also lots of great rhythms going on, and some fantastic keyboard soloing, lovely Rhodes and lovely synth playing. Yeah, I know very, very little about this guy. I think he played with Sergio Mendes. I think that's what I do know about him. Do you know anything about him, John or Teddy?
Yeah, yeah. He had an album out on Taboo Records, weirdly, in the States.
Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis.
Yeah, well, no, the label, yeah.
Wow.
They didn't produce it. I think they just put it out around the same time as SOS Band and Alexander O'Neill. These people were putting stuff out, which is kind of also really nice, actually. It's recorded with mostly American, kind of the usual kind of suspects that runs.
So, Mark, is that a reissue or is it a new recording?
It's a reissue. It's just been reissued.
It was incredibly rare. I mean, it was like hundreds and hundreds of pounds.
Yeah. It's definitely. It reminds me. I mean, of Brazilian Love Affair, George Duke, and maybe some Hermeto Pascal kind of music. But yeah, it's great, and it's out, and a great pressing as well.
Yeah, John, isn't every record before 2000 now incredibly rare?
I did one of those value checks on Discogs.
Yeah.
My top 5 items, and none of them are records. They're all kind of weird cassettes and kind of strange floppy disks and things like that. one of my most valuable things is a memory stick I've got, actually.
Really?
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, mine's not. I believe it has been reissued. This is an original Verve. Another person we lost earlier this year, Lee Conant's Motion. This is a 1961 release. It's a trio setting. Of course, with Lee on alto, but Elvin Jones is on drums, and Sonny Dallas is on bass. So this is very, very, very Tristano-ish. He's playing standards here, but you can't hardly hear the standard. It's just, you can't find it. And what I love about Conant's playing here, and he's really into that Lenny Tristano vibe where, at the time Coltrane, described as sheets of sound as he was playing. And I would describe Conant's as ribbons of sound, just continuous ribbons of sound. Interestingly, so this is 61, and this is some of the more subdued playing that you'll hear from Elvin Jones. And subdued, I mean by he's playing quietly.
Quietly, yeah.
But he's still just all over the place in his, polyrhythmic brilliance, And this is just, before Coltrane gave him license to, just go for it, But he's where Tristano loved to have just straight time, straight bass playing, straight drum playing. Sonny Dallas is doing that. Elvin Jones isn't, and it's just there's so much going on underneath. It's just great, So it's kind of a a cool jazz vibe to it. Really well played, just fantastic. Yeah, and rest in peace, Mr. Conant. He had a long run at it. But this is one of his best right here.
Definitely, I love that record. Very keen. Okay, we were talking before we started recording about Hal Wilner, and another character who kind of works in a kind of similar kind of way, really, more almost like as a movie producer rather than as a musician. Is Kip Hanrahan, and whole string of records. I mean, nobody knows about Kip Hanrahan. I did a video about him once, so I know you too. And I know Roger Coleman's a fan as well, but basically his music's extraordinary, actually. He just collects these incredible range of musicians on all his records. I mean, and people just love playing for him, actually. And I had a great moment when I was in Haiti a few years ago, and I was playing, I had a bad foot, so I couldn't go out, and I was sitting in my hotel room playing one of his, not this record, but one of his deep rumba records, extraordinary records from Afro-Cuban music. And all these people started coming into my room, sitting down in my room, listening to the music, saying, "You've got the secret stuff there. Nobody plays stuff like that, actually." So really interesting, kind of cutting across genres, very strong Afro-Cuban kind of thing going on as well.
Yeah, I mean, prior to Hanrahan, I'm like Carla Blaze, Escalator Over the Hill, the incredibly wild group of people that she was able to amass. And actually probably one of the crossovers between both of those is Jack Bruce.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because Jack Bruce played with Carla, and then was on several of Hammer Hands, and even doing some vocals and stuff. But yeah, that Latin influence is so strong and so great.
Yeah. And really, I mean, yeah. In fact, he's a big photograph of Jack on the inside.
Oh, nice.
That's what he looks like.
We're into the last records now, aren't we?
Yep.
This is well, I showed something from Khruangbin last video. This is a brand new EP, which is a collaboration between them and a singer called Leon Bridges. It's called Texas Sun, and yeah, I guess it's got more kind of vocal aspect of the Khruangbin sound. Both artists from Texas, kind of quite a sunny vibe. Kind of, yeah, 4 tunes on here. The one that I really like so far is called Seaside. Just a really sort of solid groove. Khruangbin have this very kind of minimal sound. The bass and drums just lock together beautifully, and this guitarist, he plays very much on the back pickup, with quite a lot of sort of reverb. So he kind of quite often sounds a bit like a sort of Thai guitarist you might hear in a restaurant. Vague sort of, there's a kind of psychedelic vibe to it as well. It's just just nice. Again, music. It's not overly challenging, but it sounds good to me.
Almost sounds like kind of slow down surf guitar. Basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, being that you guys are both in Britain, I just couldn't get out of here without expressing my undying love for my favorite British rock group, The Kinks.
Okay.
Ah.
And this is a reissue, remaster of Arthur, the Fall and Decline of the British Empire. But it's a double album, with a nice booklet. It's remastered by Kevin Gray. The second album features basically an unreleased album by Dave Davies, and then a few some singles and some BBC sessions, things like this. But I just love what Ray Davies was doing at this time of the, expressing this sort of post-war British angst, suburban angst, and how he was structuring things thematically. And it's just so tongue-in-cheek and just such a British way. And there was a great run of about 4 or 5 albums in a row, and this is one of the best for sure.
Definitely. I always think the Kinks had a big influence on a lot of American bands, actually. It's quite
Oh, absolutely.
I always think Yola Tenga always sound to me like they've been.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll say about it, I think Dave Davies is just one of the quintessential rock and roll guitar players. I mean, as Charlie Watts is to drums, I think Dave Davies is to guitar. Not flashy, in the pocket, everything is just perfectly placed and as the right essence, and I think the guy's great.
Okay, last record, Bob. has to be shown and seen, really. I mean, this
absolutely
is the new Bob Dylan records, Rough and Rowdy Ways, with which got to #1 in the charts in the UK. Extraordinary. I mean, kind of particularly to release the 3 of the best tracks already online beforehand. Yeah. But it's a great record. I mean, he just goes on, really. Sounds great as well, actually. It's got. I don't know much about the recording, but I know he records a lot of his stuff all analog, and this one certainly sounds like it's got the same sound on it as well. Nicely put together, kind of, and it's great to hear almost like you're being talked to by a grown-up, which is quite unusual, really. It's really has that effect. I mean, it's just, and there's this weird sense on this record that kind of past, present, and future are all kind of collapsed and all happening in the same time frame. Really great songs on here as well. Really nicely put together, the whole thing as well.
Well, yeah, and he's really gone back to you know, the lyric, it's poetry. It's poetry to music, and
Yeah.
he's, you know, he's like, okay, well, I guess I won the Nobel Prize. I better prove it.
Right.
No, it's
And
brilliant.
And it kind of, he must be really affected by COVID as well. But since somebody who basically just tours all the time, the fact not going out on the road must be hell, I should think. And the new band, which has never really played live very much, which is on here, sounds great as well. A guy called Matt Chamberlain on drums, who played with, he virtually co-produced the first Frank Ocean record. He's a really good drummer as well. So yeah, Bob.
Yeah, well, as cliche as people think he might be, he can still bring it, and he did on this one. And it's just, it's really, out of however 50, 60 albums that he's done, it slots up there quite well.
It's weird how a song about Kennedy's assassination can suddenly sound like it's about now, actually, as well, without him really. I mean, yeah, extraordinary stuff.
Yeah. Well, anyway, guys, thank you so much. This was a blast.
Oh, it's been good.
I appreciate the invite very, very, you know, wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and Ted, you're going to be back. The Eat Sleep Vinyl channel is going to be,
active again. So prepare thyself for whatever.
Yeah.
It'll be a vinyl orgy as usual.
Teddy, I just like, for the viewers, will you do your thing that you always do at the end of your videos?
Yeah, if I can remember it. Do what you can to keep it in the groove, and I'll see you next time. And please wear a mask.
Absolutely.